Hello and welcome. In today's video I'm going to use a bit of easy mathematics to analyse the Double-T Junction and Double-T grid in much more detail than in my other videos. Doing this I hope to make it more clear what the benefits of this new intersection configuration are and where it might be more applicable. Now, to save time, I'm going to assume that people have seen one of my more introductory videos on this topic and they're familiar with the basics of the Double-T Junction. I'm also going to assume that they have seen the Double-T grid, with Double-T junctions alternating orientation from one to the next and with traffic switching lanes between intersections to change direction and navigate through a city area. So, where to begin? With the Double-T junction, there are a number of advantages over conventional intersections when it comes to traffic flow. The first is that the number of lanes that can proceed through the intersection at a time is increased. With a two-way traffic intersection, you just get one lane at a time. With a conventional one-way intersection, you get two lanes at a time. But with a Double-T junction, you get 4 lanes of traffic moving through the intersection at a time. The second main benefit for traffic flow is that the time spent at red lights is reduced. Now, it's this point and its implications that I'm going to spend most of my time on in this video. In my other more introductory videos, I've talked through the benefits of the Double-T junction and grid. But in this video I'm going to take a different approach and use a very simplified mathematical model of a car moving through a city. Now, I'm not going to use a full-scale city simulation because I want the model to be deterministic, or, in other words, if anybody else tries to replicate this model, they will end up with exactly the same results. In order to create our simplified model, I'm going to first simplify all of the factors of an intersection. That will make the analysis much easier, but it should still be accurate enough for the results to remain relevant. Now, the first simplification is that I'm going to use just red and green traffic lights, so no amber lights, and of course the traffic lights are always obeyed. Next, I'm going to assume that all of the vehicle phases of a traffic light take exactly 1 minute, and pedestrians get 10 seconds. Next, I'm going to assume that the cars immediately reach their driving speed, so they accelerate straight away, and that they also don't need to slow down to go around corners. Next, I'm going to assume that each direction is going to get equal treatment, so the north-south route is going to get the same amount of green light time as the east-west route, etc. Finally, I'm going to assume that the traffic lights are independent. That is, one set of traffic lights is not synchronized with the next. Now, these last two assumptions are pretty big ones, especially in the context of how cities use synchronized traffic light systems these days. So we'll revisit these assumptions later on in this video. To start this analysis, I'm going to look at a 4-direction intersection that has two-way traffic on each road. And what I'm going to do is imagine what life is like for a car on one of the roads approaching the intersection. What are their chances of getting a red light, and if they do get a red light, how long will they have to wait until they get their green light? Let's say our northbound car on this intersection has just missed the green light and has to wait. First, they have to wait 10 seconds for the pedestrians to cross. Then they have to wait 15 seconds for the eastbound traffic. Similarly, 15 seconds for the westbound traffic. Another 15 seconds for the southbound traffic. And finally, they get a chance to move. Now, this adds up to a 55-second wait if they arrived at the worst time. Now, if they had arrived 1 second after the traffic light turned red, they would have to wait a total of 54 seconds. And if they arrived 2 seconds after, they would have to wait 53 seconds, and so on. Now, if we average out these times over the entire traffic light, we can see that a car will be waiting an average of 22 seconds here. That was a 4-direction interchange with two-way traffic. But what about traffic in a one-way system? Again, let's say our northbound car has just missed the green light and has to wait. First, they wait 10 seconds for the pedestrians to cross. Then they have to wait 30 seconds for the eastbound traffic, and then they get a chance to move themselves. So over the whole traffic light period, the wait times look a bit like this. And if we average it out, it looks like this. This gives us an average wait time of about 12 seconds. Finally, let's look at the Double-T Junction. Yet again, let's say our northbound car has just missed the green light and has to wait. They have to first wait 10 seconds for pedestrians to cross, and that's it. Then they can drive. So over the whole traffic light period, the wait times look like this. And if we average it out, it looks like this. This works out to an average wait time of less than a second. Now that we know the average traffic light wait times, we can use them in a simplified model of a city. You can see the parameters I'm using here on screen. So we're going to be modeling a fairly modest section of a city that uses relatively small square city blocks. And our modeled car is going to be traveling at a fairly common city speed limit. And our car is going to stop for the average traffic light wait time at each intersection, which in the case of two-way traffic is going to be 22 seconds. That 22-second wait time at each intersection is going to make this video a bit boring, so I'll speed the action up a bit. Now doing this, we will be able to see how long it would take on average for a car to travel from the center of our theoretical city to any other point of the same city. Now, a couple of things to keep in mind here. In this model, I let cars do U-turns. That's why you see a second car immediately. That second car represents what if that first car did a sharp U-turn straight away. Then at intersections, after making the car wait for the 22 seconds, I create 4 cars, each one representing each possible choice that the car could have made. So you can see the now many white dots. They represent the furthest part of the road network that a car could have reached in that time. Now the green shaded areas represent the parts of the city that have already been reached. Once all of the areas of the map have been visited, we can create a graph of the fraction of the city that is reachable over time. I'm going to call this the city coverage graph. So what else can we do with these simplified city models? Well, we can compare them directly. Here I'm comparing the same size and shape of a city, but with 2 different traffic systems. System with the two-way traffic on the left, and we're using a conventional one-way traffic system on the right. And let's let this model run for a while. So, while this is running, you might be wondering, why am I not trying to simulate all of the traffic in the whole city? Why don't I add in lots of different types of vehicles, each with their own start and end points, and have traffic holding up other traffic, and so on? Well, the reason why I'm doing things this way, without any randomness, is because the Double-T Junction and grid are brand new ideas. And with brand new ideas, it's very useful to be able to say things about them with certainty. In other words, I'm trying to establish a baseline of statements that you can make about these new ideas without being second-guessed. You could also see it as a trade-off. With a full simulation, you could say more about these ideas, but with less certainty. And with a simplified deterministic model like this, you can say less about the ideas, but what you can say, you are certain about. Back to the action then. We can see that after a while, the one-way traffic system does seem to be better. We can quantify this superiority with a graph of the fraction of the city that is reachable over time. And this makes it easy to see that despite the fact that the intersection in a one-way system gives you fewer direction choices, they do in fact allow our modelled car to reach more areas of the city more quickly. And in these models, that is down to the reduced stop times at the traffic lights. Now, one thing to bear in mind here is that this model does not, of course, take into account the fact that one-way intersections allow 2 lanes of traffic to pass through the intersection at a time, so their throughput is much higher. Now that we've seen the conventional one-way grid system in action, and we've shown that it's better than the conventional two-way traffic for this type of model, let's compare it with a grid of Double-T junctions. Now let's speed up the model again while it's running. I can mention another reason for modeling the city this way. I think people may have a conceptual problem with not being able to go straight ahead at an intersection. They're automatically going to assume that their journey is going to take longer. This, I think, is an easy way to demonstrate how journeys will, on average, be quicker, despite losing the ability to go straight ahead at an intersection. And in this type of model, this is mostly down to the reduced traffic light wait times. After the model has been running for a while, we can clearly see there's a big difference between the two types of one-way systems. So let's compare the 3 different systems in a graph, and we can quantify that difference. The results are pretty clear. According to our model, the Double-T grid lets our car move around the city much more quickly than a conventional one-way grid. Okay, so that particular type of city model made the Double-T grid look pretty good. But now let's change up our model and check out some of the possible downsides to the Double-T grid arrangement. So here we're going to compare both types of systems in a city that uses rectangular city blocks. Now, will these type of blocks cause a problem for Double-T grids? Well, if we let this run for a while, we can see that, yes, they do. After a while, we can see that the Double-T grid has lost the big advantage it had over the regular one-way system. And thinking about the reason why, we can see that the Double-T grid configuration is having a hard time pushing traffic in the direction of the short edge of the rectangles, or up, down, or north-south in this case. Another way to look at the problem is that in order to move north or south in the city, cars will have to loop around the longer edges, which results in them taking longer. To see how much of an effect changing to rectangular city blocks has had, let's have a look at the city coverage rate graph again. And yes, the Double-T grid now is only slightly ahead of the conventional one-way system. So what can we do about this problem? Well, the first possibility I'm going to look at is to remove some of the roads from the Double-T system. So let's run the model again, but remove half of the east-west or left-to-right streets from the system. I'll colour those in blue. And we'll let this model run for a while. While it's running, we can talk about our motivation for doing this. Essentially what we're doing here is altering the effective shape of the city blocks and making the grid look more square. So in the real world, how would you go about taking some streets out of the equation? Well, there are a few possibilities. You could use them only for local access, or dedicated to parking. You could pedestrianize the streets, and or add dedicated bicycle lanes. You could also dedicate those streets to public transport, like trams or buses. If we go back to the model now, we can see that the Double-T grid has regained much of the significant advantage that it had. And we can also see this when we graph the city coverage rate again. Now, depending on the shape of the city blocks, we could go even further and skip 2 out of 3 side roads. And in the case of the blocks we're using here, this makes our city effectively behave like a square grid city again. Now, back on my list of assumptions page, I mentioned that traffic light synchronization is an important point. When a city grid synchronizes its traffic lights effectively, it can result in a phenomenon known as a green wave. This is where travelling in one direction can be made easier because the green lights in that direction are staggered so that they will, hopefully, turn green just before you reach the next intersection. Now, check out the Wikipedia page on this for some more information. So what can we do to model a green wave and see the effect that it has? Well, we can lower the average wait time for, say, the north-south direction while keeping the east-west direction the same. This is because the green wave concept usually only works effectively when you try to optimize for one direction. So, let's compare a one-way system where the traffic lights are not synchronized, here on the left, with a one-way system where the traffic lights are synchronized, on the right. Now we can do this by reducing the north-south wait times from 12 seconds down to 3 seconds. So this is a bit like saying that travelling in that direction, you're likely to get through 4 or 5 traffic lights in a row without needing to stop. Of course, the 3-second thing is just a guess. In the real world, it will vary from that. Like, the number of traffic lights you get through in a row in the real world is dependent on quite a number of factors. The main one of those, though is the level of traffic in the system at the time. So as we let this play out, we can see the effect it is having in improving our city coverage rate. And we can also see that in our city coverage graph. As you would expect, it's a definite improvement on the non-synchronized one-way system. Now that we know the green wave system is a definite improvement, let's compare it with the Double-T grid. Here we are modelling the green wave one-way system on the left and the Double-T grid on the right. One thing to add here while this is running, I could have also reduced the average wait times of the Double-T junctions to account for synchronizing the traffic lights in a Double-T grid, but it doesn't really have much effect. Now this is because the average wait times are already quite low. In a real-life city or full-scale simulation, it would probably be a more significant effect, but that's kind of a topic for a different video. Anyway, my general hunch is that adaptive traffic control systems would suit the Double-T grid better. Like for individual intersections, having sensors that could tell how many vehicles or pedestrians were approaching and could change accordingly would probably be more useful. But also on a grid level, giving certain directions priority at certain times of the day would also be a useful feature to have. So after a while we can see that while it's a big improvement, it's still quite a way behind the Double-T grid overall. Now we can also see this when we graph the city coverage over time. Here we can see that the green wave one-way system is about halfway between the unsynchronized one-way system and the Double-T system. Maybe a bit better than halfway. But again, a bit like with the rectangular grid, there is a directional element to the way the city is covered. So while the green wave one-way system doesn't give you the same city coverage as the Double-T grid, it could allow a driver to traverse the city along a single road more quickly. So going back to our list of benefits, I think we can now add a third benefit. That a car can get where it needs to go quicker. Now, a couple of caveats that this is according to the model that we're using. Now that we've seen the results of these models running, we can also start to make a list of disadvantages. For one, the Double-T grid tends to be city block shape dependent, and also city orientation / geography dependent. Now, what do I mean by these? Well, for one, if a city has rectangular city blocks, then the Double-T grid is going to favour traffic going in the direction of the long edge of the rectangle and hinder traffic going in the perpendicular direction. Also, some cities have predominant traffic flow directions already, usually down to local geography. These cities will use conventional one-way systems that employ the green wave idea to favour traffic going in those directions. So what does all of this mean? Well, the first thing it means is that a full-scale Double-T grid may not be suitable for certain types of city grids. But that's not to say that those cities couldn't benefit from having some free-flowing Double-T junctions anyway. And so, how would you do this? Well, it's possible to create a hybrid traffic system, like this one on screen, that could use a few conventional one-way streets to allow traffic to traverse a city area, along with a Double-T grid that makes local streets accessible more quickly. It's kind of a best of both worlds kind of system. I'm nearing the end of this video now, and it's time to start wrapping things up. Firstly, I hope the mathematics, models and graphs haven't put too many people off. I think it was worth it to be able to get some interesting graphs that, at the very least, I think give us the indication that this is an idea worth investigating. So, what can the average viewer do if you reach the end of this video and you're still unconvinced? Well, to start with, don't worry. It's natural to assume that the way things have always been done is the best way. But if you're willing to give this new idea a chance, the first thing you should do, if you haven't already, is check out some of my other videos on this topic. I'm planning to have a few different ones tackling the idea from different perspectives. So check those out and give the information a bit of time to sink in. The second thing you could do, and probably the most convincing, is to try it yourself. Now, running your own city traffic simulation may sound daunting, but there is an easy way, and that's to do what I did. I did all of my initial traffic experimentation using the game Cities Skylines. Now, I recommend getting this for the PC from the Steam store, and I'm mentioning this particular version because unless they make some changes to the game, you'll need mods to properly set up Double-T junctions. But that's it, really. Get the game, put some roads on a map, try things out. It's very easy to get started, and after a while you'll get a feel for the limitations of the simulation itself, and you'll also get a rough idea of what traffic systems might work in real life and what wouldn't. After that, if there's anything I can do to help, just let me know. Now, I don't know if I'll be able to reply to every comment. At the moment, I have no idea how this concept is going to be received, but at the very least I'll try to see if there are any common questions. So if somebody else asks a question you'd like answered, just give it an upvote, and that will make it easy for me to see what the most popular questions are, and I'll try to respond. Anyway, I think this is the last video I'm going to make before I start getting some feedback from the general public on this whole idea, so hopefully the next video I make will be able to incorporate some of that feedback. One more idea to leave people with is that I know that being stopped multiple times at traffic lights for a varying amount of times is annoying for individual drivers. But that minor annoyance that happens to every driver every minute or two is actually very costly to economies when you add up the number of times it happens and multiply that by the number of drivers it happens to. It actually costs economies hundreds of billions a year, and it's predicted to get even worse. So I think this new idea is worth investigating some more. Finally then, if you want more people to see this video, and if you think the video deserves it, you can do the usual YouTube things to get the video noticed by more people. Like hit the like button, share the video with friends and family, and leave a comment if you have any questions or something to say. Also hit the subscriber button if you want to see a follow-up video. That's it. Thanks for watching.